Article 2, Section 4, Compensation Protection. Compensation protection is when a team agrees to protect, in whole or in part, the base compensation provided for by a uniform player contract in the event that such contract is terminated by the team. If the contract is terminated by the team as a result of the player's inability to exhibit sufficient skill or competitive ability, then base compensation is protected and entitled to the player, provided that none of the following 5 categories happened as a result of his violation of paragraph 12. The 5 categories are 1, lack of skill; 2, death; 3, a basketball-related injury; 4, an injury or illness; 5, a mental disability. The player is entitled to base compensation should any of the precedings occur, as long as he is not in violation of participating in prohibited activities detailed in paragraph 12. Those activities are as such: attempted suicide, intentional self-inflicted injury, abuse of alcohol, use of any prohibited substance or controlled substance, abuse or addiction to prescription drugs, conduct occurring during the commission of any felony for which the player is convicted, including a plea of guilty or no contest, participation in any riot, insurrection of war, or other military activities, or failure to comply with the requirements of paragraph 7D through I of the Uniform Player Contract. Also, a player should not be in material breach of such contract, and if the team, for its own benefit, seeks to procure an insurance policy covering the player's lack of skill, or death, or mental disability, or injury or illness, or basketball-related injury, one of those 5 categories, then the player fully cooperates with the team. And if the team, for its own benefit, has actually procured such an insurance policy, the player will cooperate fully with the team and the insurance company in the processing of the team's claim under such policy. Now, obviously, if unfortunately that instance is death, then the player's estate or beneficiary would then cooperate. Section 4F. No agreement by a team to protect, in whole or in part, the base compensation shall require such team to continue to employ the player, nor shall such agreement afford the player any right to be employed or to be deemed as having been employed by such team for any purpose. G. When a team agrees to protect the base compensation, and such protection is contingent on the satisfaction of a condition expressly set forth in Exhibit 2 to that contract, then it's applicable and effective only if the player contract has not previously been terminated at the time such condition is satisfied. When a team agrees to protect the base compensation provided for in any option year in favor of the team, such protections shall be applicable and effective only if the option to extend the term provided for in the contract was exercised by the team prior to the termination of the contract. Any option year in favor of the player, the applicability of such protection in the circumstance where the option has not been exercised by the player shall be governed by the provisions of Article 7, Section 2A. During the term of a player contract, the percentage of protected base compensation for any future season shall not exceed the percentage of unearned protected base compensation for any prior season. Hence, a team could not provide for 50% base compensation protection in the first season and 100% protection in the second season. However, the foregoing rule does not prevent a team from providing a percentage of base compensation protection in a future season that is higher than in the prior season if the higher level of base compensation for the future season is conditional and the condition cannot be satisfied until the completion of the prior season. For example, it is permissible for a contract to provide that base compensation protection for the first season of a player contract that equals 50%, and the base protection for the second season will be increased from 50 to 100% if the player is on the team's roster as of August 1st prior to the second season of the player contract. 4J. With respect to player contracts entered into or extended on or after the effective date of the collective bargaining agreement, then the maximum amount of aggregate base compensation that can be protected for death is $30 million. If a player elects to purchase term life insurance, his team shall be permitted to reimburse him each season for the premiums paid for such insurance. The insurance premiums reimbursed shall not exceed the lesser of the aggregate amount of the player's unearned base compensation for such season and each remaining season, excluding the option year if not exercised, that is not protected for death, and the difference between $70 million and the aggregate amount of the player's unearned base comp that is protected for death. It'll be the lesser of those two. Any such premium reimbursement shall not exceed the cost for 10-year guaranteed term coverage at preferred rates. If a contract contains death protection covering $10 million or more of base compensation, the player shall be precluded from purchasing life insurance for a period of 90 days following the execution or extension, as applicable, of the contract, or until such earlier time as the team notifies the player in writing that is no longer attempting to purchase the life insurance coverage. 4K. In the event that a team terminates a player contract and the team is obligated thereafter to make payments to the player pursuant to Exhibit 2 of the contract, such payments shall be made in accordance with the following schedule. If the contract is $250,000 or less, then the amounts shall be paid with semi-monthly installments prescribed by the payment schedule set forth in the contract. Each installment shall be equal to the amount of base compensation that was due per pay period until it's paid in full. If the contract exceeds $250,000, then the base compensation, if any, owed to the player pursuant to Exhibit 2 of the contract with respect to the current season at the time when the request for waivers on the player is made shall be paid in accordance with the payment schedule. For the purposes of this paragraph only, the current season means the period from September 1 through June 30th. Any remaining base compensation, if it's owed to the player, will be paid in equal amounts per year over a period equal to twice the number of NBA seasons, including any seasons covered by a player option year, remaining on this contract following the date upon which the request for waivers occurred, plus one NBA season. For this purpose, if the request for waivers is made during the period from September 1 to June 30, the number of NBA seasons remaining on this contract shall not include the current season. The rescheduled payments will be paid out in equal semi-monthly installments. Now, as an example, a player has 4 seasons remaining on his contract, and in his first season, he's entitled to $4 million, second season, $4.3 million, third season, $4.7 million, and fourth season, $5 million of base compensation. Then he has a total of $18 million in base compensation. If he's waived December 1st of the first season, then that $4 million in season 1 will be paid out per the payment schedule in his contract. The remaining $14 million will be spread out over 7 years, giving him $2 million per year for 7 years. We got 7 years because the $14 million covers seasons 2 through 4, which is 3 seasons. We're supposed to double that and then add an NBA season, which gives us 7 seasons. And then if we spread out the $14 million evenly over those 7 seasons, that gives us $2 million a year. Now, if that same player was waived on July 30th of season 1, then we're dealing with that full amount of $18 million that's going to be spread out over 9 seasons at $2 million per season. We got the 9 because we're dealing with seasons 1 through 4, which is 4 seasons. We double that and add the NBA season, which is 9. And then we take that full amount of $18 million and divide it evenly over 9 years, which is $2 million a year over 9 years. Section 4L. A team and a player are authorized to negotiate additional conditions or limitations applicable to the player's compensation protection for such categories as the team and player agree to protect that relate to only the following. 1. whether the team waives a player by a certain time or date. 2. Achievement of certain benchmarks relating to the team and or player performance or player's physical condition. 3. A player experiencing a particular injury, illness, or other medical condition. And 4. The team's ability to obtain insurance using best efforts of certain type and dollar amount within a specified period of time following execution or extension of the contract. Other than the standard conditions or limitations set forth in Section 4 and any individually negotiated conditions or limitations, no player contract may contain any additional condition or limitations. With respect to any player contract that was entered into prior to the effective date of the collective bargaining agreement, except in the case of the player contracts entered prior that have been extended, and with respect to only the years remaining on the contract, the compensation protection in such contracts shall be subject to the standard conditions or limitations set forth in Section 4 of the 2011 collective bargaining agreement. Section 5, conformity. All currently effective player contracts shall be deemed amended in such manner to require the parties to comply with all terms of this agreement via Exhibit A. No player contract entered into prior to the effective date of the CBA shall be affected by any provisions of this agreement expressly indicating that they apply to only player contracts entered into on or after the effective date of the CBA. Section 6, minimum player salary. Part A. Starting with the 2018 to 2019 salary cap year, except 10-day contracts, rest of season contracts, and two-way contracts, then the minimum annual salary scale amounts shall be adjusted by applying the percent increase or decrease to the salary cap from the preceding salary cap year to the current salary cap year. The minimum annual salary scale applicable to the player is determined by their first season covered in the contract. Part B. No 10-day contract or rest of season contract shall provide for a salary of less than the minimum player salary applicable to that player. Part C. The allocation of a deemed signing bonus in respect to an international player payment that's in excess of the excluded international player payment amount shall be considered part of the salary, provided that the salary for each season, including the allocation of any such deemed signing bonus, equals or exceeds the minimum player salary for such season. Part D. On July 1, 2017, any player contract entered into before the effective date of this CBA and was not terminated on or before June 30th needs to provide for the Exhibit C, or the minimum annual salary scale. And on July 1st of every salary cap year, any player contract other than a two-way contract shall be deemed amended to provide for the applicable minimum player salary based on the minimum annual salary scale. Part F. Every contract must contain the following sentence in Exhibit 1A. This contract is intended to provide for a base compensation for the X amount of seasons equal to the minimum player salary for such seasons with no bonuses of any kind, and shall be deemed amended to the extent necessary to so provide. Now, quote unquote, no bonuses of any kind shall not be construed to limit the ability of a team and a player to agree upon provisions entitling a player to earn compensation if he is traded to another team, or to enter into a contract with an Exhibit 10 bonus. Part G. A player contract, uniform player contract, other than a two-way contract, provides in any season for the player to earn compensation not greater than his applicable minimum player salary, protected for lack of skill, injury, or illness, may be amended to provide for the player to be paid a portion of his compensation for such season, the quote advance up to minimum player salary advance limit prior to November 15th of such season. Now, the minimum player salary advance limit is equal to the lesser of 80% of the amount of the player's compensation for such season where the lack of skill and injury or illness was protected, or 7.5% of the player's base compensation, whichever is the lesser of the two. And it must be deducted in full from the first installment of current base compensation on November 15th, and if necessary, after reducing it in full in the first installment, the second installment of current base compensation will be on December 1st. Any contract that provides for an advance must contain the following language under the payment schedule in Exhibit 1A. Player's current base compensation with respect to X amount of seasons shall be paid in accordance with paragraph 3A, except that November 15th installment of such current base compensation, and if necessary, after reducing in full the November 15th installment, the December 1 installment of such current base compensation shall be reduced by X amount of advance, which amount shall be paid to player in advance on an X date. That concludes Article 2, Sections 4 through 6, covering compensation protection, conformity, and minimum player salary, pages 22 to 35. Happy studying. See you at the top.